She doesn't belong here. This isn't a daycare. That's what Marva Elwell, president of our Stonevale Ridge HOA, said as she leaned over my daughter's stroller, just seconds before she grabbed Noah by the arms and hurled her into the courtyard pool. I didn't scream. I didn't move. Not until her fingers let go and I heard the splash. By the time the water swallowed Noah's cry, I was already over the side. Marva stood back, lips tight like she'd just won an argument. The reflecting pool wasn't meant for swimming. That's what the etched stone said. But what she didn't know was that the safety ring floating next to my daughter wasn't just a toy. It still pinged real-time telemetry to my private cloud node, and the thermal audio sensor mounted to my window above, it was still recording. If you're watching this now, I suggest you stick around and subscribe, because when a 62-year-old HOA president tries to reframe attempted child endangerment as a compliance correction, the only thing that saves your family is proof. And I had proof she didn't see coming. My name is Silas Dorn. I build aquatic safety systems for city pools and marine training centers. I'm also a widowed father to a 2-year-old named Noah. The last promise I made to my wife before she drowned in a training accident was this: our daughter will never fear the water. The float Marva saw on our porch last week, it wasn't some pool toy from a big box store. It was Lena's rescue ring, stitched with her initials and modified with embedded RFID and heat-reactive dye strips. She used it in her final Navy dive. I retrofitted it to keep our daughter safe. But Marva didn't see legacy. She saw non-compliant outdoor decor, issued a citation, then fined me, then took it. I let it go until I saw it tossed behind the HOA's dumpster like yard debris. That's when I knew Stonevale Ridge wasn't just overregulated. It was dangerous. Not because of the rules, but because Marva rewrote them in real time, with no oversight and no shame. And anyone who didn't comply, she punished. The reflecting pool courtyard was our only open-air common space. Lined with hedges and flanked by sandstone benches, it was originally a place for families. But under Marva, it became a visual tranquility zone, fenced off from children and conversation. Babies too loud? Fine. Toys left out? Violation. Laughter after 8 p.m.? Documented. I'd tried to comply. I kept Noah's activities confined to our patio. I muted her outdoor toys. I even moved her sandbox behind the side gate. But Marva wasn't looking for order. She was hunting visibility. The moment Noah existed in her line of sight, she became a threat to control. The HOA's monthly beautification day was the only time the pool area was open to residents. That morning, I dressed Noah in her sun hat, packed the modified float, and took the long route. I kept to the pavement. I stayed respectful. But Marva spotted us the moment we crossed the courtyard tile. She doesn't belong here. No one else moved. Clint Haverly, the HOA vice president, just froze, gripping the rake in his hand like it was suddenly made of glass. His eyes locked on Noah. He looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I stepped between them. Marva smirked. No visual obstructions allowed, Mr. Dorn. The board has already ruled on that float. Then she lunged, took Noah, walked 3 steps forward, and let go. Noah hit the surface sideways, just as the float slid into range. The ring flared red from body contact and began transmitting, a protocol I wrote myself after Lena died. When I surfaced with Noah in my arms, she was coughing, breathing, sobbing. Marva, already walking away. She didn't look back, but I did. Because this wasn't just a pool, this was a controlled perimeter, and she just crossed the last line. My thermal rig caught everything. The timestamp, the heat signature, the voice print. I didn't shout. I smiled. Because the HOA just committed a crime on camera, and for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't drowning anymore. Noah clung to my shirt. Her tiny hands knotted in the fabric, as if she thought the water might come back for her. I wrapped her in a towel and sat on the edge of our porch, counting every breath she took. Shaky, shallow, but steady. Marva hadn't apologized, not even a pause. She just strode back across the courtyard like she'd dropped a shopping bag, not a child. I didn't chase her, I didn't scream, I waited, because I knew how she operated. Her power didn't come from loudness, it came from paper. And sure enough, the next morning, it arrived. An official HOA notice posted to my door. Community disturbance and misuse of restricted common area. There was no mention of Noah, no mention of the pool, just a photo, grainy, taken from an angle that made it look like I was the one carrying her toward the water. Violation. $500 fine. 2-week suspension of courtyard access. My hands shook. Not because of the fine, not because of the notice, but because someone on that board, stood there with a camera as Marva threw my child into a pool and still chose this as their story. That's when I started pulling receipts. The first citation came 3 weeks earlier. Unapproved outdoor object on porch. The object was Lena's ring, drying on a hook next to Noah's rain boots. Second citation, noise violation, extended infant disturbance. That was the afternoon Noah cried through her nap during a heat wave. Third, improper use of community sidewalks. That one stunned me. I'd taken Noah around the block in her stroller. Apparently, child-operated transport devices were now prohibited unless cleared by board review. Each citation was signed electronically, with initials. Me. I looked out the window. The reflecting pool gleamed like a lie, calm, flat, framed by freshly trimmed hedges and HOA-approved planters. I couldn't see the violence in it anymore, just still water waiting for something to break the surface again. I filed my own incident report, first with the HOA, then with the non-emergency line at the local PD. The officer on the phone was calm. Asked if Noah was injured, I said no, just shaken. He took the report, but said unless there were medical injuries or witnesses willing to testify, it wouldn't move quickly. That's when I remembered Clint. He'd seen it. He'd frozen. But he hadn't stepped forward. Still, I needed to know. I needed to see if there was still someone on that board who hadn't gone blind. I walked to his home 2 doors down. The grass was cut with military precision, 2 flags in the yard, one for the Corps, one for the neighborhood. His porch light flicked on before I knocked. He opened the door halfway. No greeting, just that same look he'd had by the pool, like he'd swallowed something sharp and couldn't breathe right. "She could have drowned," I said quietly. Clint didn't speak. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to know. Did you see what she did?" He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You should keep your daughter away from her. You hear me?" Then he closed the door. That wasn't a denial, and it wasn't apathy either. That was guilt. The kind that eats through silence until it spills out sideways. 2 days later, another citation came. Security concerns. Unauthorized surveillance apparatus. They'd noticed the thermal sensor mounted in my upstairs window. Technically, it wasn't on common property. It faced the courtyard, but it didn't breach any private lines. I'd built it that way deliberately. 3 degrees inside legal tolerance. Still, the board was reviewing its impact. Noah watched me tape the violation to the back of a drawer. Her fingers clutched the corner of Lena's ring as it hung from a hook inside. She didn't ask to go outside that evening, just sat near the window, tracing the float's red stitching with her thumb. That night, I reviewed the thermal footage again, frame by frame, Marva's heat signature, her voice pattern, the splash. Noah's rising body temperature as I pulled her out. Every second logged, every variable stored. I wasn't done waiting, because when power hides behind paper, the only thing sharper is proof. And I had it, encoded, encrypted, and waiting for the moment Marva tried to rewrite reality again. The next letter came printed on ivory cardstock, delivered not to my mailbox, but slipped under my door in an envelope stamped Urgent HOA Review. Marva's style, overdressed, overstated. Still trying to convince the world she was a protector, not a tyrant. I opened it at the kitchen table with one hand, Noah on my lap in the other. She was playing with a measuring spoon, tapping it against the table rhythmically. It helped her feel calm again, that sound. Repetition, predictability. Everything the HOA wasn't. The letter was brief. Notice of policy. Breach investigation. Your continued presence in proximity to the reflecting pool, despite ongoing safety amendments, constitutes willful non-compliance. A full suspension of access to all common spaces will be evaluated at the next board session. Beneath it, in small text, pending inspection by authorized HOA compliance agents. Compliance agents. I stared at those words until the ink blurred. She wasn't just stacking citations anymore. She was building a case. She wanted me gone. Not fined, not corrected, gone. No access to the courtyard meant no paths, no playground, no benches. And if I pushed back, that's when they'd escalate. The pattern was clear. Marva had done this before, just never to someone who pushed back. I stood and walked to the back patio. The rescue ring was drying again, on the inside of the glass this time. No violation, no technical breach. But I knew she was watching, waiting for the next justification. I checked the thermal cam logs again. System intact, footage secure. The data feed pinged back to a cloud node I maintained through a side contract with the county's aquatic safety program. Marva could subpoena every HOA paper shredder in the neighborhood and still never reach that data, but that didn't mean she wouldn't try. I backed up the files to 2 separate drives, encrypted them, and stashed them in separate places. One in Noah's diaper bin, the other taped beneath the false bottom of Lena's old dive kit case. Then I made a decision. It was time to bring the outside in. I called a colleague, Margot Ingersoll, former inspector turned legal consultant. She worked with the state's Department of Real Estate now, helping identify abuse in private governance systems. I didn't mention the incident yet, just the escalation, the citations, the rewrite of rules around a single family. She paused a long time. Then she said, "You know what you're describing, right? You're not talking about HOA management. You're talking about a pattern of hostile exclusion. If you've got proof, build your timeline." So I did. Every notice, every email, every citation, screenshots from the HOA portal, dates, times, timestamps, the footage, the float, the fingerprints, everything lined up. But something was missing, something human. I couldn't be the only one she'd targeted like this. So I knocked. 2 houses down, I found the Dobsons. Young couple, moved in last year, left 2 months later. Their reason? Unresolvable community tension. They wouldn't speak on record, but the husband did say this: "We were fined for a basketball hoop we never owned." Another house, Mrs. Farrell, her dog barked once during a thunderstorm. Citation for sustained auditory disruption. Then her lawn was flagged for non-native ground cover. She sold within 6 weeks. I had enough now. Enough to show Marva wasn't applying rules. She was designing traps. Custom-fitted, precise, and impossible to escape unless you were her idea of silent, polished, invisible. That evening, I took Noah out to the courtyard, not to swim, not to provoke, just to walk, to see if she'd still be afraid. She wasn't. She pointed at the water and said softly, "Mama's ring." I smiled. "Yeah, baby, that's hers and yours." Behind us, Clint stood on his porch watching. He didn't wave, but he didn't look away either. The next morning, I woke to silence. No birds, no sprinklers, no wind. Just that kind of charged stillness that tells you something's off. I checked the front window. 2 vehicles sat at the curb, black SUVs, private plates. One of them had a clipboard on the dash. I didn't need to read it to know. Compliance inspection. They were here to evaluate the thermal sensor. By the time I stepped onto the porch, they were already halfway across the courtyard. 2 men, matching polos, HOA lanyards swinging in the breeze. One held a small thermal reader. The other had a clipboard, of course. Always a clipboard. They weren't looking at the neighborhood. They were scanning it. I kept my tone calm. "You boys need a warrant for that kind of surveillance in this state." The taller one looked up. "Just confirming that no privacy laws are being violated by non-board approved surveillance units." He smiled like he was reading off a training manual. "You understand, Mr. Dorn? Community cohesion and all." "You mean the sensor in my window pointed at my property line?" He flipped a page. "There's concern about scope and angle. If it captures any part of the common area, we're required to assess potential visual infringement." That was the term now, visual infringement. I nodded slowly. "You'll want to step back 3 feet. The angle narrows to private-only view from that range. I designed it that way. ADA consistent, compliant with state CCTV tolerances." He didn't reply, but the way his jaw shifted told me he knew I wasn't bluffing. That afternoon, I pulled up the footage again, not just the pool incident, but every clip since installation. What I hadn't expected was the pattern that emerged: Marva pacing the courtyard at night, talking to different residents in hushed tones, dropping letters at doors by hand, bypassing board votes, and most damning, 2 separate clips showing her tampering with the posted policy board outside the clubhouse. She was updating rules physically, before submitting digital records. The timestamp discrepancies proved it. I isolated one clip in particular, 3 nights before the incident with Noah. Marva peels back the weatherproof seal on the HOA bulletin board, swaps out the official PDF with a new printed amendment, then reseals it. The camera caught the original in full view before she swapped it. The title, Proposed Rule, Reflecting Pool Child. Restriction, Draft, Not Yet Passed. I froze the frame, highlighted the timestamp, saved it. That was it. She implemented a rule that didn't exist at the time of the incident, then retrofitted evidence to make it look like it did. Not just a moral failure, this was procedural fraud. I sent the clip to Margot with a brief note. "Is this enough?" She replied 10 minutes later. "It's enough for the DRE to open an audit, and for CPS to start asking questions if the pool incident is filed with a video." But something still gnawed at me. The footage proved the timeline manipulation. But the board wouldn't budge unless someone inside cracked. I needed Clint. So I waited for dusk and walked the long way around, avoiding the pool, avoiding the clubhouse. His porch light was on. I stepped up and knocked twice, slow. He opened the door before the second knock finished. "Figured you'd be by." "I need 10 minutes, I said. "That's it." He stepped aside. We didn't sit. I pulled out the tablet, showed him the paused clip of Marva swapping the rule sheet. Let it play once, then twice. "She said that rule was passed weeks ago," I said. "But this was 3 nights before. You signed off on the official record, right?" He nodded reluctantly. "Then you know that rule wasn't in effect." He didn't deny it. I tapped the screen again. "I don't need a speech, Clint. Just a yes or no. Did she falsify board policy to justify what she did to my daughter?" His eyes dropped to the floor. For a long second, all I heard was the buzz of the porch light. "Yes," he said. I didn't thank him. I just said, "You'll be hearing from the state." He nodded. And for the first time, I saw something close to relief in his eyes. The HOA's monthly Community Harmony email hit inboxes at 6:01 a.m. sharp. Same template, same font, same platitudes. But this time, the top section bore a new headline. Updated Code 14B, now official policy, reflecting pool child restriction enforced. I stared at it for a long moment before opening the full newsletter. The language was thinly veiled legalese, citing incidents involving minors as justification for restricting children under 5 from all perimeter areas of the reflecting pool. It referenced community concerns and claimed a board vote had passed unanimously. That was a lie. I had the footage that proved the amendment was posted after the incident. And now they were laundering Marva's actions through policy, trying to turn a crime into compliance. I forwarded the email to Margot. Within minutes, she replied, "They have now crossed the threshold for both procedural misconduct and safety-related falsification. This puts them in violation of Section 7.6.2 of the CA Civil Code for HOAs. Submit the timeline today." I opened my timeline doc, 48 entries deep by now. Citations, camera captures, witness hesitation, now paired with the newsletter. Itself. Clint's whispered yes still echoed in the back of my mind, but I needed one final confirmation before I handed this over. I printed out the email, tucked it in my folder, and walked to the community center. The board was holding office hours, technically to receive homeowner feedback, though no one I knew had ever gotten an answer longer than 4 words from them. Marva was there already, seated at her table with that glassy smile. One of the other board members sat beside her, pretending to read budget estimates. I stepped up, calm, folder in hand. "Good morning," I said. "I received the newsletter." Marva looked up. "As did everyone else, I imagine. We like to keep the community informed." "I'm just curious," I said, tapping the paper. "This section says the vote was unanimous, but the policy draft shows a revision date after the incident with my daughter. You signed this new version?" Her smile thinned. "Our legal team advised that updates were necessary for clarity. The intent of the policy was always understood by the board." "Intent doesn't carry a timestamp," I said. "The law does." Her face barely twitched. "Mr. Dorn, if you continue this tone, I'll have to refer your behavior to the compliance committee." "Perfect," I said. "Make sure they timestamp that too." I turned and left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't raise my voice. Just walked straight back to my house, uploaded the final clips, The memo Clint had slipped me, the newsletter, and the audio I'd recorded during that brief exchange. It wasn't illegal. California is a one-party consent state. She hadn't asked me to leave. She hadn't said off the record. Every word was now part of the record. By noon, I sent the entire package to Margot with the subject line: Final Timeline, plus footage, plus policy fraud. Then I contacted CPS. I didn't tell them about the censor or the HOA history, just the incident. A toddler thrown into a pool by a neighborhood authority figure. I included the footage, the email, the falsified policy. They opened the file immediately. That night, Noah and I sat on the porch. The rescue ring lay beside her, wrapped in a towel. She leaned her head against my arm and whispered, "Pool not scary anymore." I smiled, even though my chest ached. "It's not," I said. "Not with you here." A soft knock came at the gate. Clint, no clipboard, no badge. Just a man holding a folded sheet of paper. He passed it over the fence without speaking. I unfolded it, a resignation letter, dated and signed, effective immediately. I looked up at him. "She'll know," I said quietly. "She already does," he replied. Then he turned and walked into the dark. 3 days passed before I heard back from the Department of Real Estate. The email was brief but clear. "Formal inquiry initiated. You may be contacted by enforcement staff." Attached was a case number and a file upload link. No fluff, no promises. Just a quiet confirmation that the machinery had started to turn. That same afternoon, I received a letter taped to my garage. No envelope, no header, just thick block text printed on plain paper. Remove illegal surveillance equipment or face immediate fines and suspension of membership privileges. No name, no signature, just fear, pinned like a threat on my property. I didn't bother responding. I had something stronger now. Clint's resignation hit the HOA portal that evening. The board listed it under personal health reasons. But those who'd been at the last meeting knew better. The silence around it was loud. No replacement was named, no meeting scheduled to discuss it. Just a quiet line break where his name used to be. And then, one by one, the emails began. Not from the board, from the neighbors. The first came from Mrs. Farrell, the one with the barking dog and the non-native grass. "I heard what happened with your daughter," she wrote. "She did something similar to my grandson 2 years ago. I never said anything. I'm sorry." Attached was a photo, her violation notice from that year, citing unauthorized youth conduct near community plantings. The conduct in question? Her grandson running through the mulch beds chasing a butterfly. Another came from the Sandovals, who'd left a year prior. "We moved because of her. Our teenage daughter was accused of threatening behavior for standing too close to the clubhouse door while on the phone. They fined us $200 before we could appeal." I compiled it all. Screenshots, emails, scans. A new folder labeled Community Statements. It wasn't just about Noah anymore. Marva had been operating unchecked for years, manufacturing compliance infractions like a weapon. And no one had challenged her because she kept it quiet, spread out, one target at a time. But now those targets were speaking. And then Clint called. No voicemail, just a missed call. I dialed back immediately. He answered with a sharp inhale, like he hadn't expected me to return it so quickly. "She's panicking," he said. "She knows it's coming. I heard from Alan. He's the treasurer. She told him if the board gets audited, she'll bring down anyone who doesn't back her. That includes me. But I'm not on the board anymore, Silas. I'm not protected. You're not alone either." There was a pause on the line. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Then he spoke again. "I saved something. I didn't mean to. I just kept it." He emailed it before I could ask. It was a scanned copy of the original board vote minutes, dated 2 weeks before the pool incident. It showed clearly, reflecting pool proximity rule, not yet reviewed, vote postponed, signed by all members, including Marva. That single document proved everything. The policy she used to justify throwing my daughter into the water didn't just lack legal backing, it hadn't even been reviewed. She fabricated the enforcement clause, falsified the date, and weaponized it within 72 hours. I added the minutes to the timeline, time-stamped Clint's email, uploaded both to the DRE portal. Margot called the same night. "They'll fast-track it now," she said. "This isn't just misconduct. This is procedural fraud with material harm to a minor. You may get a call from CPS again. Be ready." I hung up and walked into Noah's room. She was asleep, curled around the rescue ring like it was a stuffed animal. Her breath was slow and steady. The nightlight flickered gently in the corner, painting ripples across the ceiling like the surface of the pool. I sat beside her for a long time, listening to her breathe. Marva had built a fortress out of rules and citations and silence. But now the cracks were starting to show. By sunrise, the cracks had widened. A new notice appeared on the HOA bulletin board, this one unsigned, typed in courier font, as if pulled from a manual. It read, "Unauthorized community surveillance constitutes a breach of neighborhood trust. Any residents involved in unlawful data collection will face disciplinary action and civil liability." I didn't need to be named. Everyone knew who it was meant for. But this time, someone had scrawled a response in black ink across the bottom. Funny how trust only matters when someone else holds the evidence. The handwriting wasn't Clint's. Someone else had stepped forward. By mid-morning, my inbox had 5 more emails, all from residents. Each one shared a story, a letter, a petty fine, a threat. Marva's empire was unraveling, but she didn't know how to stop it, so she escalated. The next board meeting was scheduled in less than 72 hours. The agenda was posted hastily, filled with vague items. Reassessment of pool area security protocols. Emergency discussion of resident behavior. Re-election of interim vice president. The timing wasn't accidental. She was trying to fill Clint's seat before the state could act. Secure her majority again. Close the door before enforcement landed on her doorstep. But I wasn't planning to wait. I sat down at my workbench and pulled out the encrypted drives. One by one, I copied the contents into a clean, forensically logged package. Pool footage, audio clips, digital renderings of the courtyard's layout with surveillance angles, timestamp overlays, Clint's signed email, the scanned vote sheet. I included the tampering footage from the HOA bulletin board, the newsletter contradiction, and the memo where she cited a rule that didn't yet exist. Every file was labeled, cross-referenced, chain of custody confirmed. Then I built the payload, a clean link, password locked, sent only to the Department of Real Estate, CPS, and Margot. I timestamped the delivery, included my sworn statement, and added a line at the top. This submission contains all primary source evidence of procedural fraud, attempted cover-up, and minor endangerment by Marva Elwell, president of the Stonevale Ridge HOA. After I hit send, I backed everything up, again, and burned 3 physical copies to disks. One went into Noah's keepsake box, another into my safe deposit drawer, the third into a fireproof bag that I sealed and duct taped to the underside of my car's rear deck. Let her come. Let her try to scrub the records. The story wasn't just digital anymore. It was embedded. At sunset, I walked Noah down to the community courtyard. She carried her float, dragging it by one handle like a blanket. Residents passed us. Some smiled, some nodded. A few looked away. But no one stopped us. Not this time. I sat on the edge of the pool, Noah beside me, her toes dangling over the side. The ring floated between us, spinning slowly in the breeze. Then a shadow broke the light behind us. Marva. Her heels clicked once against the tile, then again. She didn't speak. Just stood there, watching, measuring. I didn't turn around. "You've made this bigger than it needed to be," she said finally, her voice low, without the sugarcoat she wore for board meetings. "You could have resolved this quietly. You mean buried it. I mean preserved the reputation of this community. This neighborhood was orderly until you decided your child's needs outweighed the rules." I stood, slow and deliberate, looked her straight in the eye. My child didn't need to outweigh anything. She just needed to exist. You're the one who couldn't handle that. Her jaw tensed. For a moment, I saw something in her expression. Not fear, containment. Like she was barely holding something back. "You'll regret this," she said. I shook my head. "You already do. You just don't know it yet." She walked away without another word. Noah looked up at me. "That's the mean lady?" I nodded. "Not for much longer. Because when you've spent your life writing the rules, the worst thing someone can do is read them back to you with proof. The day before the board meeting, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, printed, not digital. It showed me kneeling by the pool with Noah, the float in my hand. The angle was grainy from a distance, but unmistakable. The timestamp in the corner had been digitally altered to read 1 week before the incident. A second sheet was stapled behind it. Unauthorized child endangerment documentation to be reviewed by board. Repeat violations may result in parental welfare inquiry. She wasn't just doubling down. She was trying to rewrite the story again. Only this time, she was reaching for the nuclear option, implying I was unfit, dangerous, that I had endangered my daughter. The message was clear. If I didn't back down, she'd make CPS turn its eyes on me. I sat at the kitchen table, the photo in one hand, my breathing tight. Noah played nearby, humming to herself, stacking blocks with steady focus. Her small laugh cut through the haze like sunlight. That's what this was about. Always had been. She couldn't control that joy. Couldn't stand that something unapproved, unregulated, unplanned could thrive here. I scanned the photo, logged the metadata, pixel breakdown, light exposure pattern, noise grain. The compression artifacting around the timestamp gave it away. It had been doctored sloppily, probably by someone on the board without technical knowledge. I ran a side-by-side against the original thermal footage from that day. Didn't match. I labeled the file, Forgery A1 PDF, and sent it to Margot. Her reply came back fast. Submit this directly. If she's distributing falsified CPS warnings, that's felony territory. If you have proof it came from her, I don't, I replied. Not yet, but I would. That night, I walked back to Clint's. No knocking this time. I just waited near the side fence until I saw his porch light flicker once, then again. A signal. He met me behind the garage, flashlight off, arms crossed. She's panicking, I said. Just got a fake CPS threat, backdated photo. He didn't look surprised, just tired. She's been cornered before, he said, but not like this, not with the state watching. She's desperate. I need more, anything, something she can't talk her way out of. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small audio recorder. What's this? A board call, 2 weeks ago. She thought I'd already hung up. I hit play. Her voice came through, muffled but clear enough. If this gets out, it's not just about the pool. I'll lose the insurance subsidies, the chair spot on the regional council. Hell, I might get sued. I don't care what it takes. Bury him in citations. Leak a CPS tip if you have to. Just shut him up before the audit hits. I paused the clip. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Is this admissible? I asked. It's not just admissible, Clint said. It's the end of her. I added the audio to the report, cross-referenced it with the forged photo, annotated every instance of retaliatory escalation. I included Clint's resignation, the prior statements from neighbors. I restructured the timeline to make it courtroom clean. No rage, no editorial. Just facts, timestamps, names. Before sunrise, I sent the final compiled dossier to the Department of Real Estate, CPS, and the county attorney's office. All tagged, all locked, all verified. I also printed 3 copies, one for the HOA public record, one for the press, and one for tomorrow night's meeting. The last one I sealed in a red envelope. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but because for the first time in weeks, I didn't have to wonder what came next. The truth was already on its way. The community center looked different at night, less like a place for potlucks and HOA newsletters, more like a courtroom waiting to happen. Folding chairs formed a tight semicircle around the long plastic table where the board usually sat. Tonight, only 2 board members showed up. Alan, the treasurer, and a woman I didn't recognize who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Marva arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a clipboard thick with papers. She didn't look at me as she entered, didn't need to. Her entire posture screamed control until she realized Clint was already there, seated in the audience beside Mrs. Farrell and 3 other longtime residents who hadn't been to a meeting in months. Something was shifting. You could feel it. The air was brittle. Alan cleared his throat and opened the session. This meeting of the Stonevale Ridge HOA Board is now in session. We'll begin with community concerns before moving into our scheduled vote. Before he could finish, I stood. Point of inquiry. Marva rolled her eyes without turning. Alan blinked. You have the floor, Mr. Dorn. I walked forward and placed the red envelope at the center of the board's table. Let it sit there for a beat. This contains evidence of policy fraud, timeline falsification, and an incident of child endangerment committed by sitting President Marva Elwell. It's been submitted to the Department of Real Estate, Child Protective Services, and the county attorney. I'm providing it to this board out of courtesy, not obligation. Marva didn't even flinch. I'd like it entered into the HOA's official meeting record, I added. Alan looked at the envelope like it might burn him. That's not typical protocol. Neither is forging timestamps, Clint said, voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Let it in. The room was silent. Marva's fingers tensed around her pen. Any objection? Alan asked quietly. No one spoke. He nodded once and took the envelope. I turned to face the residents. My daughter was thrown into the reflecting pool by this board's president during a public HOA event. That moment is on video. So is the tampering of posted policies to retroactively justify it. I have audio recordings of this board planning retaliatory citations and CPS threats against me for refusing to stay quiet. A murmur moved through the room. I kept going. I've received over 20 statements from former residents and homeowners who were fined, threatened, or forced to move due to similarly targeted harassment. This isn't new, it's just finally exposed. Marva stood slowly, her smile stretched tight. This is a gross mischaracterization of events. We operate within full compliance of state regulations. Any footage or documents acquired without board authorization are inadmissible and represent an invasion of board privacy. Clint laughed once, sharp and dry. You mean the recording of you saying, and I quote, leak a CPS tip if you have to? Marva turned to him, face red. You resigned. You have no standing here. I have ears, he said, and a conscience. That's more than I can say for what's left of this board. Alan looked trapped between them, flipping through the envelope's contents now. His face grew more strained with each page. Marva, he said softly, these vote dates, they don't match the filed versions. Her jaw tightened. They were revised for clarity. These are signature stamped after the enforcement notices, he said. You told us they were already approved. They were understood. Clint stood. This board has failed in its duty to protect residents. It has violated its own bylaws, and it allowed a child to be endangered under the guise of aesthetics. I looked at Alan. You want to avoid liability? You start by removing her, tonight. Marva slammed her clipboard down. This is defamation. No, Alan said. It's documented. The vote was called. 2 in favor of removal, none opposed. Marva stormed out before the gavel hit the table. The red envelope remained, sealed again, and now logged in the official HOA record. Marva didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. Her porch lights stayed off, mailbox untouched, shutters drawn. The house that once held the HOA's iron well now looks like it had been abandoned mid-sentence. The hedges she'd once fined a neighbor over for being uneven had started to brown at the roots. But the real shift came on day 3. That morning, a marked sedan from the Department of Real Estate parked at the curb outside the clubhouse. 2 inspectors stepped out, badges visible, clipboards in hand. They weren't subtle. They knocked on 5 doors, asked 10 questions, took photos of posted policies, and measured angles at the reflecting pool like they were investigating a crime scene. Because they were. Later that afternoon, a plain white car from Child Protective Services pulled up to my driveway. My stomach clenched, even though I knew this was protocol. The caseworker, a woman named Tanya with a soft voice and harder eyes, stepped out holding a slim folder. I just need to ask a few questions, Mr. Dorn. I nodded. Of course. Noah sat inside, watching cartoons. I left the door open just enough to hear her giggle and let Tanya sit with me on the porch. She didn't waste time. We've reviewed the footage. There's no concern of negligence on your part. Quite the opposite. Your response was immediate, controlled, and consistent with training. I just have to ask this formally. Was your daughter injured? Shaken. Nothing physical. I had her evaluated. I kept the report. She nodded. I've seen it. Then she lowered the folder and looked me in the eye. Do you know how rare this is for someone to follow through, document, Record. You built a timeline that most of our internal cases struggle to piece together in 6 months. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for praise. I just wanted it over. We're closing the investigation on your end today, she said, and opening one on Marva Elwell. I exhaled slowly. Will there be charges? That depends on the DA, but she's already under active inquiry for misuse of authority, procedural fraud, and false CPS reporting. That alone may be enough for a misdemeanor. Is that all it'll be? For now, she said. But if more residents speak up, if patterns of retaliation keep surfacing, the case changes. They're speaking, I said. You'll see. She stood. For what it's worth, you did everything right. I watched her leave without another word. The car pulled away, quiet, unmarked, but final. That evening, the clubhouse lights were on. I walked in to find a dozen residents seated around the main table, some old faces, some new. Clint was already there, a legal pad in front of him, pen ready. Alan sat 2 seats down, no longer hunched. He looked like a man who'd survived a controlled burn. Clint stood. This is not an official board meeting, he said. This is a transition forum. The board has been dissolved under temporary audit by the Department of Real Estate, and interim administrative duties have been handed to a volunteer committee, pending full re-election next month. No gasps, no shock, just quiet relief. Until then, we'll be working with a legal consultant to revise the bylaws. Retroactive amendments will be flagged and suspended. All fines issued in the last 12 months are under review. A woman raised her hand. What about the child ban? Rescinded, Clint said. Effective immediately. He looked at me. And we'd like to ask Mr. Dorn to join the oversight panel. Help advise on community safety reform. I hesitated. I appreciate that, but I won't be joining. A few faces turned, puzzled. I didn't do this to hold a position, I said. I did it because someone thought my daughter didn't belong here, and I couldn't let that stand. I turned to leave, but before I stepped out, I looked back at the table. Just make sure no one else has to build a server just to protect their kid from their neighbors. Outside, the courtyard lights flickered on. Noah's float rested on the edge of the pool, the red stitching bright beneath the lamplight. It wasn't drifting this time. It was anchored. The clubhouse was quiet the next morning, not empty, just quiet in a way that felt earned, like the air had been scrubbed clean of the fear that used to hang in every corner. The old bulletin board, once cluttered with threats disguised as policies, had been taken down. In its place stood a corkboard wrapped in soft fabric, pinned with photos of neighborhood events, drawings from kids, even a recipe card from the Dobsons, who, as it turns out, were moving back in. But the center of the board held something else, a framed image of Noah's float. Not just the ring itself, but a photograph of her holding it that afternoon after the incident. Eyes red, hair wet, wrapped in a towel, her tiny hand gripping the loop like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Below it, a plaque read, "For the children who deserve to be safe, seen, and heard." I stood there longer than I meant to, hand resting on the edge of the frame. Clint approached from the side, dressed down in jeans and a t-shirt, no clipboard in sight. "She doesn't live here anymore," he said. "Marva," he nodded, "moved out 2 days ago, quietly. Word is she took a settlement to avoid a formal lawsuit. Insurance dropped the HOA the day after the footage went public. Good." He reached into his jacket and handed me an envelope. I hesitated. "It's not more evidence," he said. "It's from Alan, the final vote transcript, unanimous approval to fund a permanent family safety committee." I took the envelope but didn't open it, just nodded. Outside, Noah ran in circles under the trees, her laughter high and bright, chasing soap bubbles blown by another little boy. His mother waved to me from the benches. I waved back. We weren't invisible anymore. Later that afternoon, I took Noah to the reflecting pool, not to reclaim it, but to let it become what it always should have been. We sat on the edge, bare feet skimming the surface. I held the float in my lap and traced Lena's initials stitched into the fabric. Noah leaned against me and whispered, "She'd like it here now." "Yeah," I said. "She really would." The water shimmered beneath us, undisturbed, quiet. Not the kind of silence that hides things, but the kind that follows justice. The kind that lingers when wrongs have been named, recorded, and answered. Noah dipped her toes again and smiled. Not scary anymore. Never again, I told her, because the truth wasn't just seen. It was proven. It didn't matter how many policies Marva wrote or how many lies she tried to stitch into official letters. In the end, she couldn't control what people knew once they saw it for themselves. And the ones who saw it clearly, the ones who helped, who confessed, who finally stepped forward, they were the reason this place had a future again. Not because the board changed, but because the community did. Because people stopped being afraid of her and started being responsible for each other. The HOA didn't just lose control, it lost permission, and I made sure that door would never reopen. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt cornered by someone hiding behind authority, behind policy, behind their own sick definition of order, don't stay silent. Speak, share, document. Because power built on silence dies in the light. Subscribe if you're still watching. There are more stories like this. Stories that start quiet but end loud. And if you've got one of your own,